Hello, everyone. Welcome to MECCA Moments for what is the date? I always forget the date. It's October 23rd, Friday, October 23rd. Today we're talking about mental health and breast cancer. Dr. Mack, you are in the house this Friday. How are you?
Woo! I'm
I'm
good.
good.
I'm
I'm
good.
good.
I'm
I'm
happy
happy
to
to
be
be
here
here
with
with
this
this
amazing,
amazing,
amazing
amazing
group
group
of
of
women.
women.
So
So
I'm
I'm
really
really
excited.
excited. Nice. Can you introduce our guest today?
Absolutely.
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 So we have with us today Miss Monica Jackson, a senior territory business manager for a leading biopharmaceutical company. She's also an adjunct professor in teaching and teaches healthcare marketing. Monica is passionate about providing help to those who have faced or are faced with healthcare concerns. And as a breast cancer survivor, Monica knows firsthand the need to have loving hearts and an educated team of professionals to stand in the gap for patients in need of medical, financial, and emotional resources during one of the most trying times in their lives. Monica has amassed many achievements and accolades as a top sales performer, including a Winner's Circle Award. And she holds a BA in psychology and an MBA in healthcare marketing from Howard University and St. Joseph's University, respectively. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you for having me, Keisha.
You're welcome. I'm so excited y'all are here. Y'all don't understand. And then we have Miss Nick Kober, Esquire. She is the principal managing partner at Kober, Johnson and Romney, an award-winning legal and business consulting firm. She is an executive coach and business strategist who specializes in developing management, legal, and branding strategies for leaders in the business world. She has recently been appointed by the Small Business Administration to the National Women's Business Council, a bipartisan council that advises the White House, Congress, and the SBA on matters concerning women in business. She has podcasts, a podcast, CEOs, and Soul Talk. It's currently being produced at the National Press Club. And she also has a book, CEO of My Soul, which was published in 2016. And it blends valuable business advice with true accounts of relationship struggles, family triumphs, and self reflection. And so, no, there is no platform that Miss Kober cannot manage. Welcome, Nick. And we have Mrs. Meady Barnelli. Mrs. Meady, let me just say Meady, is a healthcare professional who leads in the nursing profession as the nursing director of surgical oncology at MedStar Washington Hospital Center. And after spending over a decade working in acute care setting, Meady says that she knows that what's most important for helping patients is it's about how well you connect with their hearts of the beating people you've been charged to serve during some of their most vulnerable times of their lives. Meady additionally serves as chair of the Washington, D.C. Board of Nursing and functions as a nursing leader and a member of various organizations such as the American Nurses Association and the National Council of State Board of Nursing. Meady is also a member of the Washington, D.C. Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, as well as the president of 12 Days of Christmas Incorporated. And small fact, we are all members of 12 Days of Christmas Incorporated. So these women also are not only amazing in the business world, but they are also truly, truly giving of themselves as well. Meady also has a passion for health, as she is an avid runner, having done many marathons, 5Ks, all that good stuff. I see her on the trail all the time when I'm running too. And she has a bachelor's of science degree in nursing from Howard University, and master's in nursing leadership and administration from Jacksonville University. She's been married for 21 years and has an amazing son who's 14 years old. Welcome, Meady. Thank you again, ladies.
Well, welcome.
For all being here.
Welcome, everyone. We have such a great group, it looks like. Good job, Dr. Mack, putting everyone together.
I was really intentional about
Okay.
putting the group together because I wanted to share different perspectives. We have Monica Jackson, who is a 15-year survivor of breast cancer. And then we have our dear friend Nick Kober, who's currently fighting breast cancer and kicking its ass too. So I really wanted to have their perspectives. And then we have our nurse oncologist here who can bring it all together. So I think we have a really great group.
Indeed, we do. And so let's get right into it. Let's start out with the experiences. I know you just said that Monica, has been has been a 15-year survivor. Monica, you want to tell us your story for our audience?
Sure. Well, I can start. I take that title, survivor. It humbles me because it's not just about me. It's a community of people from healthcare, your family, friends. But my story starts when I was 3 months pregnant with my daughter, and I was going to one OBGYN practice, and their guidelines stated that you had to see a midwife first. So imagine my surprise. I'd never seen a midwife before. And she, of course, asked me the question that many women are faced with: do you do self-breast examinations? And I was honest with her, and I said, honestly, I really don't know what I'm feeling for. And she said, well, if you ever feel anything, it'll probably feel a lot like the charm on your necklace that I have on now. She said, it'll be round, hard, and immovable. So she went along to do the exam. She showed me that these areas here, still breast tissue, around here, still breast tissue, which I'd never heard before. So she had done her exam, and a couple of weeks later, I was doing it myself. And I kept going up under my arm, and I would feel like this knot every time. Leave it alone, come back to the exact same place. It was still there. I dismissed it, and then maybe another week later, I thought I was having chest pain. So of course, I'm like, let me go get that checked out. Went to my doctor, did the EKG, everything's fine. And I said, oh, by the way, I felt this. And I will say that I honestly believe, had she not had personal experience, and also being a woman, my doctor's mother had passed away from breast cancer. So she could have easily said, you're pregnant, your body's going through a lot of changes. We'll check that out after your delivery. But she didn't. She immediately said, I want you to go get an ultrasound today. So I went to get the ultrasound, and this was the furthest thing from my mind. Of course, in my family, diabetes. I was always in the doctor's office like, oh, you check me for diabetes. It runs in my family. This was the furthest thing from my mind. I'm very confident. So as you remember, Keisha, we were together. Keisha and I have an annual girlfriend's date. We were at the Kennedy Center, and I told her, I said, oh, I have to go get a biopsy. So Monday morning, I'm listening to my messages, and as I'm listening to my messages, I get a beep, and it's my doctor. And everyone knows that when your doctor calls, it's not good. But the first thing that he said was, it's cancer, but it's curable. Immediately, I went into action. I got off the phone with him. I called important members of my family and friends down the list because I needed to get to work to see what is it that I needed to do. My personality is that I'm going to take it on. In my mind, I said, okay, I need to get a double mastectomy. I need to do all these things. I was taking it on myself. But one thing, like I said, in terms of being a survivor, it wasn't just me. So it was, immediately my mother-in-law. She was at work in New York. I saw her, 4 hours later. She came right down to be by my side. Friends sending flowers immediately with notes that said, like, you're the strongest person I know. Coworkers that I didn't know that well prayed with me over the phone. Just having friends and family to talk to, it was just invaluable. My mother came and spent the summer with me, provided me with meals after every one of my radiation treatments. My husband at the time being with me at every doctor's appointment. So it's completely critical that you have a great support system if you're fortunate enough to do so, to have that great support system to help. So that was part of my story. And then also just being in the industry, being in pharmaceutical sales, I had the great fortune of being in the medical community where I had one doctor who was very discouraged in that same OBGYN practice. He kept saying, well, I don't want to deliver you early because of the baby's lung function. And I'm very positive, and to myself, like, he's bringing me down every time I go see him. So within my territory, I shared the information with a doctor that I actually called on. And he said, well, I want you to go see this Dr. Anne Arundel Hospital, and she sat down with me and she listened to me just like this story right here. And she said, She said, who told you you can't be delivered early? She said, I'm going to prescribe you a steroid. I can deliver you next Monday. It's more important for you to be here than to be worried about lung function so you can take care of your babies. And that was part of my story.
Sorry about that. I put myself on mute. Just saying, it's been 15 years since that day. And thank you for sharing your story. And now, Nick, you were recently diagnosed. Is that true?
That is true.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. I admire Monica for being able to tell her story. It's obviously still emotional for me as I'm going through it, but I will tell what happened to me. So my husband and I are business partners, and around this time last year, we were going to get some key man insurance for our business. And as you guys know, that requires you to get testing and blood work and all that stuff. And so we did it at the same time. This was around last November, and my numbers came back really great. You know, they were like, oh, we have great, blood pressure, great cholesterol. They gave me premium health rate, premium rates. On the other hand, he had some issues, so he didn't get as good of insurance as I did. And I make everything funny. I was like, you need to get your life together. My life is all the way together. I am healthy. You need to get it right. So then we get to January, and I said, well, now I'm riding the health the riding high on the health train here. I was like, let me go in and get my annual. I went to my primary care physician, and usually the thing that is wrong with me is I may have dermatitis. Okay, that's the low level of conversations that I've had. That day, the same thing, nothing. She did a breast exam, all was right, all was well. Now, normally with those two clean bills of health, that would have been enough for me to not be back to the doctor for another 2 years. This year, that time was different, and there was a little voice in me, i.e. God, said she didn't ask about a mammogram. And like I said, normally, we're all go, go, go. I've never had any health conditions. I would have looked over that, but not this time. I said, well, let me go to my OBGYN and just check in with her and see if she asked about a mammogram. I go in there in February, is the first Monday of February 2020. And again, I'm just rambling on about, nothingness. And she does the breast exam too. And I knew I was going to pass, but I was wrong. She said, do you feel this? And my heart stopped. From that point, she said, well, there may not be anything wrong, but let's get you in on a Wednesday to get a mammogram. That Wednesday, I did go in. They found several masses like Monica. Then they did an ultrasound after that and found even more. And I was diagnosed with multicentric breast cancer in my left breast. I did a biopsy that same Wednesday. So it was just very traumatic. And then there's a little thing called the coronavirus that was also in my picture and what I had to deal with. So I was able to have a surgery, but as some of you know, I did share that was questionable when I was going, my diagnosis was in February and my surgery was at the end of March. And if you all remember, there was just a lot of mixed messages. The country shut down around that time. And, my doctors, every time I went, they were like, well, we might have to push it back, or, well, we may not be able to see you regularly. So that was almost as scary, if not more, than the diagnosis was the uncertainty with my health during the pandemic. But fortunately, I have big faith, and I had excellent surgeons. I was able to have my surgery. I was able to have all of my chemotherapy. I had 16 chemotherapy sessions throughout the year, and now I'm entering into my radiation sessions. And to Monica's point, there is something as inner strength and faith, and when that is coupled with external support of your family, of your friends, every single person on this call, the women, sorry, all of the women on this call were my wind beneath my wings. They really kept me lifted. They kept me encouraged. My family, my boys, my husband, oh my gracious, not missing a doctor appointment and still holding the family down. It is a humbling experience, but I think it's definitely not a sisterhood that anybody would want to be a part of. But my gracious, when you are a part of it, you really just get out of your own self and connect with so many other strong people. And I know it sounds funny, but I'm actually grateful for this experience.
Now, media as a practitioner, let's bring you in. Is this common in both stories? Both of them seem seemingly okay. Is this a common experience where you're walking around, living your life, and feeling fine, and this happens? Is this common for women to experience?
So thank you for asking that question. One, I just want to first again commend the MECCA Group and Dr. Mack for having us on today to be able to share this message, particularly as October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And my own mother, and my mother died from ovarian uterine cancer, and my husband, who I've never had the opportunity to meet, his mother, my mother-in-law, passed away from breast cancer. So I think this message is extremely timely for us to share. To answer your question specifically, the vast majority of women, thanks to science and thanks to the things that we are now doing in a medical field, if they are diagnosed early on, are able to recover and are able to live a good life, a good and healthy life. Particularly since we are all African American women on this call today, what I would share is that we unfortunately are anywhere from 6 to 8 times more likely to have a negative impact of breast cancer, not because of the diagnosis, because our white female counterparts actually are diagnosed at exactly the same rate. The problem is that we are diagnosed much later. And so obviously the later you're diagnosed, the worse your prognosis can be. And so as Keisha shared in her experience, I'm sorry, not Keisha, as Monica shared, if we waited 9 or 10 more months, who knows what would happen? In Nicole's situation, what happens if we waited till the pandemic was over? Well, that could be a year or 2 years from now, who knows? And so meanwhile, those cancer cells are ravishing our bodies. So I think being a self-advocate that both of these women were, and having the wherewithal to continue to not just fight the medical fight, but fight the insurance, the pushing of the physicians to ensure that they get the treatment sooner than later is what's very imperative, because many times the average woman does not do that. And so unfortunately, when you sit back and wait, and not unfortunately, I am a health provider, but I do think, and I advocate for everyone, you have to be a self-advocate and not just sit and wait for the practitioner to tell you what is next. You have to push, ask questions, and able to make sure whatever your diagnosis is. And as a woman of faith, I do believe that what's going to happen will be. However, he also gave us a wherewithal to have the strength to forge forward. And so I think, again, to answer your specific question, the majority of women, breast cancer is treatable, it is curable, as long as it is caught in its early stages prior to its later advanced stages that it can take place.
So early stages is what's most important, and being proactive and advocating for yourself. And in Nick's case, both cases, listening to those whispers of like, I need to do more, I need to check, I something's happening, I feel great, but there's something more that I should investigate. How has your diagnosis impacted your families, ladies?
Nicole?
I didn't hear the question.
How has the diagnosis impacted your families and friends and relationships?
Um, well, I think one good anecdote is my relationship with my son. So I have a 23-year-old and a 13-year-old. And I think any parent's impulse is they don't want their child to worry or stress. So those were difficult conversations to have. However, since we had, not only was I diagnosed, but again, during the pandemic, we've all been in here together. And I think seeing, we all have that super mom cape that we wear. Well, I had to take it off, and I had to ask for help, and I had to be vulnerable and say, not feeling good today, guys. They had to see me cry. I don't think my children had to that point really ever seen me cry. And so it was therapeutic. I think it made them have a bigger sense of me as a person, a human being, not just this one-dimensional role as mom. And I think that was something that I think in the long run they will benefit from as human beings, being more empathetic as young men. So I am proud of that.
Yeah, and I would say for me, same in terms of having similar personalities, taking on the world and taking on the world for everyone else, having that moment where you do have to sit down and listen, asking for help. I remember my husband at the time and my mother packing my wound. I couldn't, I wasn't taking care, I couldn't take care of myself. And I would say just in terms of relationship, because I do have 2 daughters, and as I said, I was pregnant with my youngest at the time. So having that conversation with them, of course, not right away, they were too young, but as they grew older, wanting to understand what happened. And my daughter, MECCA, she was born in June. Her astrological sign is Cancer. So I took that to have a story where to tell her that if it wasn't for her, she took it out of my body because she took it out. And so we have that special bond of, almost in a sisterhood, mother-daughter sisterhood. She helped me at the time. Had I not been pregnant, maybe those cancer cells may not have replicated at the rate that they were. And I wouldn't have noticed it at the time because I wouldn't have had a reason to be in a doctor's office. But I also wanted to go back to Meaty's point of self-advocacy. Being a survivor of 15 years, once you reach a certain threshold, I think it's 10, maybe you could support me on that, maybe 10 years out, they look at you as if you have never had breast cancer before. So when I go in for my mammograms, they want to give me a screening mammogram, whereas I need a diagnostic mammogram because I have dense breast tissue. And to your point again, Meaty, not every woman knows that. So that's where you have to be in the doctor's office with your oncologist. Remember, does that request say diagnostic mammogram? Also, when they need something is denied and they're doing peer-to-peer recommendations with the insurance company. The problem is sometimes your oncologist could be talking to someone who does not have the same credentials as they do. So being in that fight with them to say, no, remember, this is what happened last year. This is why I need this year. And just have an ongoing relationship with the oncologist just so that you can be a self-advocate for yourself. You have to, especially as you get further out into success, into survivorship, because again, the attention definitely does. And I'm grateful that when you're first diagnosed, all hands are on you. But as you go out into survivorship, focus is more on the newly diagnosed is where it should be. That's where you need to step up and say, I'm an advocate for myself and I need to take care of myself and be a partner on the team.
If I can take 20 seconds to jump in, what Monica said is so imperative. I don't remember if I told Keisha this, but I also had a lump removed from both one of my breasts. I had one removed when I was a freshman in college, when I was 18 years old, and I had one removed about 7 years ago. Gratefully, they came back negative, but as she indicated, as I shared earlier, rather, my mother died of ovarian uterine cancer, and I have an aunt on my mother's side who was a breast cancer survivor. And so the last screening, the biopsy that I had about 6 years ago, I had to do exactly what Monica shared. My husband actually works for an insurance company, and initially they were denying it. I was like, do you understand what my family history is? So do you rather just wait for me to get this, and or would you like to go ahead and biopsy this now just to be on the safe side? So what's your return on investment? So I really had to take a look at my own health as if I'm buying a car or a house or insurance. I'm like, what are you all talking about? Fortunately, it was finally approved. But to Nick's point, and obviously with Dr. Mack and what she does with mental health wellness, is that a lot of times those are things that people don't think about, that when you're going through cancer, be it breast or prostate or whatever it is, and quite frankly, any medical illness, there's so many other stresses that are involved that I think have a negative impact on one's mental health in order for you to focus on your physical health. And so again, you have to be a self-advocate. And a lot of people don't realize what you said, Monica, that there's options. You can ask for a peer review. You can ask for a second opinion. You can make an appeal. Most times when the insurance company says no, we think that's no is no, but I don't take no for an answer. So thank you for bringing that up. And I wanted to share that even though I don't have that shared experience with them, but I find with my sisters because I too am always worried and concerned because of my own family history and having 2 biopsies and one on each one of my breasts. So it's not just one. So it's always a very frightening thing that even sits in the back of my own mind. So absolutely. I think you're still on mute.
Dr. Mack, maybe we can get, I can bring you in on this. You know, we talk about advocacy. How do you advocate for yourself if you don't know where to start? What is the psychology of advocacy? And, you know, Meaty, when you don't really know the health part, where do you start? And how do you push to get answers that you don't even know the questions to?
Well, I want to answer so that I'm not over. So what I want to say that it is very different. I'm a healthcare provider. So if there's an issue or something that you have with health, ask one of your friends or colleagues who's a healthcare provider. Nicola's a lawyer. If I'm not a lawyer, don't ask me anything legal. So if I'm not sure, then you reach out for that. If I'm depressed or I'm really stressed out, Keisha will tell you, I've called her in tears during this pandemic because like, what the heck is going on? And our senior leadership of our country is saying one thing, but I'm going into the hospital every day. So you reach out to that mental health professional. And so I think it is no different. You have to look at your health and what's happening I'm not a mechanic. If my car breaks down, guess where I'm going? To the dealership. So very simply put, you have to make sure you sometimes compartmentalize things and look for the help for the people who have the expertise and or are the subject matter experts to help you get what you need. Thanks, Dr. Mack.
Because I was muted.
I think
part of the challenge is, when you're going through this trying to advocate for yourself, is that you are actually when you're going through, the diagnosis or just getting the diagnosis or your treatment, is that you can't really focus on that. So it's difficult for you to actually focus on the other side. You're really thinking a lot about your physical well-being. How are you and I know these 2 women, they're thinking about their families, so then that, interferes with their ability to actually advocate for themselves, or some people's abilities to advocate for themselves. And then also it can be a matter of your personality too. Some folks are just not as confident with being able to assert themselves or speak for themselves. They feel like they're being pushy, or that they don't know as much as this person knows. This is a doctor, so he or she should know what they're speaking about. And so sometimes that can play a role in it. And believe it or not, that's one of the things that therapists can do with individuals who have breast cancer or other illnesses, is to help them to find that voice so that they can advocate for themselves, to help them to find that voice to say, no, this is not okay. I need this, as Monica said, or as Nick said, or as even you said, Needy. So that's some of the work that I've done with clients and helping them to find their voices to advocate for themselves. And then even after these experiences, being able to take that voice and use it in other situations to advocate.
I
for
love that,
themselves.
Dr. Mack, and I love Meaty. You know, it's about finding people who are experts in that area. You wouldn't go to, you know, a mechanic for health information, but really looking at your support network and finding resources to get the answers that you need, and never stopping, Dr. Mack, and using your voice. Let's talk about the impact on your physical health and emotions, ladies. We can start with Nicole. Nick.
So, as I'm still going through, I'll say the physical toll is it just literally from head to foot, no pun intended. So, you know, hair loss, that's troubling. My nails, I don't know if you guys can see them from now. It's not nail polish. This is the effects of chemotherapy, not just the color, but neuropathy, where you know you have tingling sensations or numbness in your fingers. I have that in my toes as well. My muscles, literally my thigh muscles. I say this to everyone because, you know, I have been sharing and transparent, but I do put on, you know, my best face for everyone. I am positive. And when the camera goes off, I have to deal with these impacts. They are still ongoing. I mentioned my legs. I'm not in the category of Dr. Mack or Nurse Cindy in that they are health nuts, advocates, beautiful ones. I envy every picture that I see, but that was not my background. I have always been thin, but even my leg muscles, just natural muscles to walk, are diminished, you know. So these are, and that's very troubling for someone who has taken their health for granted. So I'm now, since I'm almost at the end of all of this, I'm getting up every morning, mental health and physical health, stretching, just stretching my feet, stretching my hands, being able, look, forget 10 push-ups. If I'm able to literally use my arm muscles to do one, that helps my mental health as well as try to rehabilitate my physical. I do want to say something, and I was hesitant about this, but the ladies talk about getting a lot of different counsel, especially when you are vulnerable and this is not your area of expertise. I will agree that, you know, I've been going through this almost a year, and the way that I have gotten through this is to be a low informed patient, meaning I had a team of doctors. They got second opinions. I do have trusted counsel in Meaty for the things that just as a layperson I didn't understand. But after a while, there is such a thing as having too much content. And as everyone on this call knows, you know, breast cancer or cancer is like a thumbprint. It's so individualistic almost to your body that sometimes hearing someone else's experience is not helpful, and it's more stressful. Wonder what may happen instead of getting on the roller coaster ride yourself. Don't be in line looking at all the twists and turns. On the ride, experience what you're experiencing in that day, and then thank God for that day, and then you move on to the next day and what that experience will be. And being present has been very therapeutic for me. I show up when I can. When I cannot, I don't. But I've had so many more good days along this journey than bad as a result of just being so narrowly focused on my experience in that moment.
Dr. Mack, we're going to talk about that. I want to talk about coping strategies in a second, but we're going to hear Monica's experience. But yes, I want you to come back and talk about coping strategies and how to deal with that. Monica, you want to talk about your experience?
So physically, with mine, just to Nick's point, it's so individualized. where I was stage 1, had not traveled to my lymph nodes. I did not have chemotherapy. I did have radiation after my daughter was born. And again, having that support system, I would say that it didn't, I was on maternity leave, so I didn't have the pressures of going to work, and having that support system with me. I can honestly say I was fortunate in that I didn't feel it. My mother had breakfast for me every morning after my treatment to make sure that I was nourished, to make sure that I had energy. So I was very fortunate that I didn't have that direct effect. The most that I could say is I did have, I guess, what is called like a sunburn or suntan from radiation. And I feel very blessed that that's what I can say that I went through. But also, to Nick's point, I wanted to bring up is I concur with that being individualized and sometimes being overwhelmed, because I remember sitting with one group of doctors after having heard from another group of doctors one day, and they had a different opinion, and I literally broke down and walked out of the office. It was too much for me at that time. As much as I'm in the industry around medical professionals every day, at that moment it was too much. It was too much information for me to process, and it was overwhelming. Right now, in terms of the effect it has ongoing, I know I'm more conscious of what I need to do. I know I may not feel like doing, again, to Nick's point, not doing the 10 miles for lunch, but I did just get a Peloton, and we'll see what happens with that. I know I need some low impact.
I got one of those too, Monica.
Yeah, I need low impact activity because I can't risk any fractures or anything like that. So just keep that always being in the back of your mind, just mentally, whether it's physically, whether it's regarding your career, your family. It always sits on your shoulder to guide you, to keep you focused. It's actually been a blessing in a lot of ways.
Now back to you, Dr. Mack. Thank you so much, Monica, for sharing your story. Dr. Mack, let's talk about coping. I hear avoidance coping, possibly. What are some coping strategies that happens when you're given news and it's so much information? Like the lady said, so much information, and the struggle to be in the moment. How do you cope with?
I think when Nick was speaking about staying in the moment and staying present, that was on point. Being mindful. That is really, really a big part of being able to manage and cope with everything that you're experiencing, taking it day by day, step by step, moment by moment, even. Not even thinking about later on in the day, what's happening right here, right now. What can I control in this moment? And that is something that is very important to be able to do. And different people have different experiences with their emotions when they receive a diagnosis. There's that initial shock of the diagnosis and having that, the worries, the fear, what's going to happen. But even as you're going through, and even through survival, women who have had experienced breast cancer continue to have ongoing concerns, ongoing mental health challenges, ongoing issues and things that they worry about even 15 years later, as Monica was saying. So those strategies of staying in the moment, being mindful, keeping your support systems around you. And, some women, they do have, support groups, but everybody doesn't want to do a support group because, as Nick said, hearing everybody's story may not resonate or may even present more fear. But that's something that some women do. Individual therapy is also a great option because, it gives you a space to talk about, whatever else is going on in your life. You are not your breast cancer. There may be other things that are going on that when people see you or you're around people, that's what they think of. But here's a person who can allow you to talk about whatever else it is in your life that you're going through at the same time as you're going through your battle with breast cancer. So having therapy and a person to share that with is it could be a valuable tool for women who are experiencing this.
Nurse Meady, is there a recommendation for therapy or counseling when a patient comes to a doctor and finds out that they may be diagnosed with breast cancer? What does the medical professionals play in the part of finding therapy and counseling for patients?
That is an amazing question, and I'm going to start off with a full, transparent disclaimer that this is Meaty Bartinelli's, the nurse, personal opinion. Many times, most surgeons, like surgeons in general, because a lot of surgeons that I've dealt with are cardiac, surgical oncologists, and breast GYN oncologists, etc. So I think you have to first understand that cancer patients, first of all, cancer is an extremely complex diagnosis, right? It's not just hypertension. Not that most diagnoses aren't complex, but specifically cancer. And what happens is that when you're starting on this cancer journey, and who am I to share more eloquently as Monica and Nick have already shared, but it is a spectrum, which is why most times in most facilities, if they're worth their salt, they have what's called a nurse navigator. And that person is really there to help truly navigate you through this journey. Monica used the term survivorship. So I typically deal with patients immediately post-diagnosis. And so as Nick shared, oh God, go to a doctor, everything is great. Next thing I know, I get this diagnosis and boom, the next thing she needs is surgery in her case, right? So there's surgery, then you have to recuperate from the actual surgery. Then you have the surgery, and this is not just breast cancer, this is typically any type of cancer. Then the oncologist will determine, do you get chemo? Or in Monica's situation, no chemo, but she's getting radiation. In Nick's situation, she's doing both. And so then you get chemo, you have to recuperate from chemo because that obviously wreaks havoc on your body. Then you have to start radiation if that's also a part of your treatment plan. That wreaks havoc on your body, as Monica then shared. Then you have to recuperate and heal from all of that. In the meantime, there might be other systemic issues that are happening, kidney issues, liver issues, heart issues, skin issues, etc. Not to mention mental health, right? And so, and then once you're done with all of that, then you heal and hopefully you live to survive, as Monica has shared 10 to 15 years later. Now you're in a survivorship mode, and then prayerfully you live life. So that is a huge, huge spectrum for anyone to have to navigate, whereas most other diagnoses, it's a much shorter term. We have to understand that most surgeons sometimes are really only focused on that surgery, and you have to ensure that you have a great team, as Nick mentioned, that is looking at not just the surgery, but also what happens after, and also your mental health. As an actual cardiac ICU nurse by trade, I've taken care of hundreds of patients who have an open heart bypass, and that too is also something where people are now always thinking about my heart, because that has an impact on your sexual life, it has an impact on your physical activity that you can do. And so this is always in your mind. And not to be too scientific, but when you are stressed, your body releases inflammatory molecules that are called cytokines. And these cytokines can transmit into your brain and basically mimic depression, which can increase you to have decreased appetite. Your sleep patterns are now disturbed, and you basically mimic all of these things as having depression, which is where the MECCA Group comes in. You see a Dr. Mack or someone of that nature that can help you, whether it be a psychiatrist and or a psychologist that can really help you do that. Because if it's left untreated, it does have an impact on cancer treatment and your survivorship. Yes. Because if you're not able to deal with that, I literally have seen patients who, fortunately, I believe Nick and Monica are very strong, fortuitous women who have a good faith, who have a great support system. They are blessed. And there are some women who may not have that. They may not have the insurance. They may not have the financial means. They may not have the spouse or the mother to cook the breakfast, or the son to be at home and support you. And so there are some women are really going through this alone, men and women, quite frankly. Yeah. And so that has a huge mental impact, and people have literally just said, I'm done. Like, I'm done. I don't want to do this. And so that not only does it impact the survivorship because you don't get the treatment that you need, but it impacts your ability to fight. Yeah. And as a nurse, as Keisha read my little bio, I really do believe that it is about relationships that you have with your patient at the most vulnerable time. And it is no longer, medicine cannot be seen as just the treatment of the disease. These are women. Nick is my friend. Monica is my friend. They are not cancer survivors to me. First and foremost, they are my friend. and so who happen to have diagnosed with cancer. And so you have to make sure you do that and speak that positivity into other people's lives, not negating it. I'm just simply stating that that is who they are. And sometimes us in the medical field will say, oh, go see that patient in room 2. Oh, she's diagnosed with pancreatic cancer or whatever. I'm like, no, that is Nick Cover, a wife, a mother. That is Monica, a mother, 2 beautiful women. And so that is who she is. And so you have to see them for who they are so you can then go about doing their care plan that needs to be done. And it has to be interdisciplinary, and you cannot forget mind, body, and soul. And you can't forget somebody's spiritual aspect that also gives them the will and desire to have the fight to go through what they're going through.
Dr. Mack, I mean, just listening to Meady talk about this stuff, it's so easy to get lost in the identity of that diagnosis. How do you work through, finding something that helps your body heal?
And just to piggyback on one thing that you said about depression, that's really, really significant, because there have been, studies that have shown, this one study did an analysis, and the mortality rate was as much as 26 times higher in women who had depression, who had breast cancer. So that is hugely important that part is treated. You have to be mentally, you're fighting physically, but you also have to fight mentally as well. Because without, being able, as Meady said, to get up in the morning, to go out to get your treatment, depression reduces your motivation, it reduces your energy. And as she said, the stress releases those chemicals into your body that, fights against what you're actually trying to do. So I think it's really, really important that folks understand that mental health in this particular, fighting this particular disease is not only, it's really not an option. You have to take care of your mental health as you are fighting these diseases. And so, to that point, I think, you made an excellent point that it has to be interdisciplinary. It has to be a team. And, not everyone is going to go see a therapist, and I recognize that. But there are other ways to be well mentally. You can do things such as, yoga, and you may not be able to do everything. You can do meditation, walking. And I love what Nick said. She said, look, if I can just push my arms back, that just gives me life, that kind of thing, where you do things to increase your spirits, something that's going to lift your spirit, and whatever that may be. If it's just going for a walk, if it's just sitting down for a movie night with your family, any of those things that can give you positive feelings, positive energy, you can do. But I do think that it's not even an option as you're being treated and going through these battles.
I just want to jump in real quick on that point of being different in terms of what you need individually, because I think maybe I cheated a little bit by having you as a family friend. But also what was different for me, like many other women, I'm sure, I was not the group therapy person. As a matter of fact, I wanted to get back to Monica, the individual, so much so that I wanted to do the many things that I, had always done. Focus on my family, focus on my friends, focus on achievements at work, because I wanted to distance myself, not completely ignore it, but just distance myself. I didn't want to be the poster child or the poster woman, yet I did want to provide education for those who asked me. If I was in a room of women, I'd share my story, talking one-on-one, I would share. But for me, where I got my energy was not necessarily in a formal therapy.
I think that's important to note, what you said, Monica and Dr. Mack, about, you don't always have to go to therapy, but you need to let yourself, experience and work to be in the present. Nick, how has your experiences, mental health impacted your journey?
How has it impacted my journey? I guess it's hard because I'm I'm still going through it. I've just tried to balance between personal time and public time. my, even though I'm an attorney, I feel like my career is as a communicator. I do a lot of messaging in groups, television, advocating for businesses. But I am still deeply, as Monica is, deeply private in trying to process in real time how I'm feeling. And I've done that since I was a very young girl. I didn't need other people to help me interpret all the time, because I was always like, what am I feeling today? What am I feeling? I would say in the beginning of the diagnosis, really the things that were stressful weren't the things that you would think of. Like, I got through surgery and things, but what was stressful was the unknown. Had that time where they really didn't know where it was. Then they get in surgery and it was further than they thought. I am a stage 4 breast cancer patient. They found it in my lymph nodes. They found it in my chest wall. So the diagnosing, the finding that out, that was for a confessed control freak like myself. The not knowing was so much harder than just the plan. Just give me a plan. If I get a plan, I'll knock it out. I'm not emotive over physical pain. I'm not emotive. I am emotive over emotional stress. To me is having other people tell me or not have the clarity. That was very stressful for me, because from then, after we got the plan, I have been, dare I say, happy. I'm like, I can deal with it. I also say it's my mom's favorite phrase is re-engineering your thinking. And cancer is such a heavy word, stage 4, such a heavy term. So I don't really focus on that. I really focus on, geez, I've had time to heal. Everybody was shut down, So I'm like, hey, I don't have to go out as much. I just work from home. I really just focused on the blessings, focused on the relationships, focused on the things that I can control, which is my mindset. I have ultimate autonomy on how I look at things. And Meaty can tell you, I've had moments where, when I started to lose my hair, that was pivotal, like being able to see yourself. I couldn't see myself anymore. I had a really cute little haircut. And when people say, and Meaty was one of them, oh, well, your hair was short all the time. It's different being bald. Different. Got the same thing. So just and finally finding your sense of humor in it all. That is so important. Everything is temporary, but your mindset, your ability to show up in this world and be able to laugh at yourself, it's a connecting thing. It keeps you grounded instead of everything being, so despondent. I've just tried to chuckle my way on through, and I'm proud of that.
Dr. Mack, it sounds like Nick has done and found a lot of ways to reframe
that's exactly
her experiences.
That's exactly
So talk about. She was my teacher, so I know a lot. I know a few things. So how can, when you're feeling out of control and anxious, what are some ways to work through that experience?
Absolutely. And Nick made it. She hit it right on the head. Type A personality, control freak, not being able to, know what's happening. I mean, we all are. Everybody in the room. So we all can relate to that, And so what is the thing that causes us the most worry and and actual anxiety, because that's what anxiety is. It's not being able to know. It's that not inability to have control over something that you want to control. So that's all anxiety is not being able to control it, and doing just that reframe, finding other ways to look at things, and with anxiety, a lot of times what happens is we tell ourselves stories of what that ending is going to be, And that story is usually going to be, well, it is going to be probably 100 times worse than the actual reality of the situation. And so what you're getting anxious about, what you're scared about, is that story you created in your mind that probably isn't the truth. And so that's why it's really important to kind of stay in the moment and what you can control, or take back that story like, no, no, that's not where I'm going. That's not what I'm going to allow myself to think about, and bring yourself back here and tell yourself some other stories. And remember the things that are actually happening. Like you said, Nick, the things that you do have control over, the things that are great that are happening in your life, the things that you can manage. That's why you have to stay right here, right now in that moment. Because that story you're going to tell yourself is going to send you over the edge, because it's going to be filled with the worst thing that could ever possibly happen to you. Yeah. So bravo, kudos, you're doing exactly what you should be doing, bringing it back to this reality.
And Dr. Mack, you just really reminded me is that I think for any person, and as a nurse, I know we're talking about breast cancer today, but anytime you get any diagnosis, have faith and trust and believe that that doesn't necessarily mean that is the end. I'm a firm believer in speaking things into existence as though they were. And then that there's so many stories, like literally documented stories of people where the doctor said person on this ventilator would die, and they miraculously are walking out of the hospital. And unfortunately, the news doesn't share those stories as much. And I don't believe that we should give false hope, but I'm just simply indicating is that sometimes we do have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and we have to be uncomfortable with unknowing. And if anything, I think every single person living in this world has experienced that during this pandemic, because this pandemic is worldwide, right? It's not just the US. And so we all had to be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. And one thing that I want to share, that oftentimes I feel as a very fierce patient advocate, I have to remind my surgeons, hey, Ms. Smith hasn't gotten out of the bed and has not walked in the hallway for 3 days. I think you should get a psych consult. And a lot of times, oh, okay, well, we'll see. Like, no, you don't understand. When she came in, she was bubbly, she was happy, Nick was saying, or Monica, but for some reason, that's not happening. And so a lot of times when you're particularly in an acute care setting, that can be missed. And sometimes my patients, unfortunately, are with me anywhere from typically a week to sometimes 2 weeks. Sometimes I have patients for almost a month that are literally in the hospital who have not been outside of the hospital unit in a month. And just putting them in a wheelchair to feel the sunlight on their skin does miracles for them. One other thing, in closing, I just wanted to add as well, I talked earlier about hypertension, diabetes, all these other things that are happening. There is nothing wrong with mental health. And if you happen to need, I'm not purporting by any stretch of the imagination that you take drugs for anything. I do believe that you should seek help, talk things out, and figure out what is the best method for you. But if you are physically going through something, seeing Dr. Mack or seeing a psychiatrist that can prescribe a psychosomatic something that can help you push through what you have to go through is absolutely okay. Yeah. And as African Americans, we are often most overlooked with our mental health because of the stigma that comes with it. Absolutely. And quite frankly, I believe that the majority of us, this is my own thing, Dr. Mack, my own diagnosis, that a lot of us are really just taught to be bipolar by virtue of being African Americans in the United States of America, because we have to be one face. When I see Keisha, like I see Keisha, I know who Dr. Mack is, but I've also seen Dr. Mack, right? And so both sides of who that is, a lot of times we navigate both sides of the waters. And I think as African Americans, we sometimes shy away from mental health and getting the help that we need, and or if it means getting something, an aid that can particularly help you. Yeah. Again, I want to reiterate, I'm not saying just pop a pill, because that is not who I am. I believe if you go out and exercise, just as much as those cytokines can produce those negative hormones, exercising and doing different things of that nature can also create positive hormones as well that can impact your health. But I do think that we need to make sure that, most importantly, if you're going through something as Nick has gone through, Monica has gone through, etc., if you need that, talk to someone who can walk you through that path to figure out what is best for you, and don't be ashamed to do so, because mental health is real. And I do believe that God would not have allowed those things to happen if you have the right person in your corner to navigate you through that process.
Yeah, Absolutely.
said.
I totally agree. There, the stigma is still here. I do think that since we've been, there's been a movement toward, and there's been a lot more talk around mental health within the Black community, particularly during this pandemic, and seeing everything that's happening with the racial injustices and the current, political climate. I will say that something positive that has come up is that we definitely are seeing more Black and brown folks calling into our offices and saying, we want help. They are calling us. And we have been really busy. And it's just a beautiful thing to see more people actually wanting to take care of themselves and wanting to heal and wanting to be well, not just physically, but also mentally. Because being well mentally will help you to be well physically. It just is what it is. And as Meady was saying, that it's also, I totally agree with you with regard to the medication. I think there is a bigger stigma in our community around, possibly having to take medications. I too am not one to say, go get some meds. I'm always believe in taking a step-by-step approach and doing the least, harm first, which is, possibly doing therapy. And if there is a need, as if you were a diabetic or have high cholesterol, you're going to go take your meds. Same difference. That it could also make a very big difference in your ability to just get up in the morning and go do your chemotherapy, or get up in the morning and do your radiation. Because if you're so depressed and you're so low motivated that you can't do that, then how do you get better? So I really appreciate you bringing out that point, Meady.
Yeah, very, very good points for the both of you. Monica, can you tell me how are you continuing your journey, your survivor story, and how are you helping others? I see you have a shirt on. I don't know if that's something that
Actually,
you.
the shirt is my Dory Williams. It's called Advocates for Disease Education. So I support it because this is something that's near and dear to her heart. So just being a part of foundations such as A4DE, educating other women, that look like me specifically, because oftentimes that we don't, I can't necessarily say if it's still today, but I know when I was diagnosed, it was very shocking. Like, Black women, we don't get breast cancer. And then to be young, breast cancer, pregnant at the time. So the way that I keep myself focused is the same way I kept myself focused at diagnosis. I had complete faith. I knew that God put me in front of certain people because it was his intention to have me live. So I live that same way every day, that I know I went through this because I was intended to live. And I still take on, being charitable acts and gifts for other people. I still flourish at work and at home. I'm, do what I can to make sure that I'm a positive role model at home for my own children, whether that's, just talking to them, whether it's going to get another degree. Just, I want them to have a positive role model right here at home. So that's how I keep myself grounded and focused is with them.
Well, thank you for sharing your story, Monica. Nick, do you have anything that you want to share before we go?
Um, one thing that Monica talked about is like something I didn't know. I do want to give a takeaway. Dense breasts and the correlation with mammograms. So in the state of Virginia, I don't speak for any other state, but when a woman has dense breasts, mammograms may not be sufficient to detect cancer cells. Both Monica and I had ultrasound sonogram, I get them mixed up sometimes, but they had a secondary level that can go in. And in Virginia, your doctor has to inform you of that fact, that if you are, you do have dense breasts, that you may need to, that may be insufficient in terms of a mammogram. I think women should know that. I think when they think, hey, I got my mammogram, I'm fine. Yeah, but most of us do have dense tissues and may be diagnosed later as a result of maybe a false negative result. So I want to put that out there. I also want to just thank my friends on the call, my 12 Day Sisters. Sometimes you do think, we all should do things for the love of it. So all of us are philanthropists for children. We love doing that, but we love each other. We've been, looking cute at parties and delivering and shopping all these years. And you think that that's kind of the extent of your connection, but I was shocked and humbled by the amount of support. I mean, it was a tidal wave of affection, a tidal wave of love, when I did not even know I needed it. To know that you have touched people, it was humbling to be able to receive that back. And I do think as Black women, sometimes there's this myth that, we're angry Black women, we don't get along, we're catty. No, when you put good energy out, when you put love out, it comes back in amazing ways. And it was very therapeutic for me at the time that I needed it the most in my life. So I just wanted to thank these beautiful women for loving me.
Yeah,
that's what it's all about.
On that part too, Nick mentioned about the different therapies after. So to your point, it's not just mammogram yearly. So I get my yearly mammogram, but I also get a yearly MRI because of the dense breast tissue. Mm-hmm. And again, thank you for your, Nick, your positive outlook, just looking beautiful, already being beautiful inside and out. So I knew that you would handle this with the grace that you always do and come out a fighter and winner. So I'm thankful and grateful for you. And of course,
I'm about to cry.
Thank you for
y'all know about me. Oh my God.
Again, just again,
I'm so emotional because you guys are really making a difference, and I'm just so humble and thankful.
Thank you, Keisha. Thank you.
That's all I can say.
Me,
I wasn't prepared for
tears. They hadn't seen me cry and they were crying. And I said, that's love too. Yeah. We think it's with the cheerleading, pom-poms and party, but love or tears. It's just it's an arc of emotions. And it's hard, but it's easier when we do have other people to support and to cry those tears with you, as well as to give you those hugs and things. So that has been, so I said I didn't go to therapy. That's so not true. I have 44 women and just dozens of other therapy sessions, whether it be texts, cards, or well wishes. So thank you guys for engaging that in this conversation as well.
Thank you.
I love it. I love to see all this happiness and smiling and support, because that's what it's about. It's really about supporting each other, and that's why MECCA does these moments, is to support people with information and resources. Midi, before we go, I know it's all women on here, but I want to talk briefly about the prevalence of breast cancer in males. Can you tell me briefly about that? Because we all have brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles, granddads.
Absolutely. Maybe something that was something I want to tag on before we end it. So thank you for answering or asking that question. First thing that everyone has to realize is that 1 out of 100 men are diagnosed with breast cancer. 1 out of 100. And men just are as impacted as I shared my beloved mother-in-law, who I never had the opportunity to meet, who passed away from breast cancer. And so that is something, that my husband is obviously keenly aware of. And so men need to be mindful, as Nick and Monica were speaking of dense breast tissue. If you have gynecomastia, which is typically where men have, they like like to use the term male boobs, but those are things that they need to make sure that they too should do, as Monica said, doing the self-breast exams just to make sure, because men also do get breast cancer. I repeat, men do get breast cancer, 1 out of 100. And so we need to be mindful. Breast cancer can also sometimes, because of if you have other cancers, prostate or pancreatic cancer, those things can sometimes metastasize. Lung cancer can metastasize to your breast tissue for men. So it is so imperative that men do exactly the things that Nick and Monica have done, no different from women. If you feel something, I hate to use a term, but if you see something, say something. If you feel something, say something. And a lot of men, I think, because of the obvious stigma that one would say, tend to not do that. So my messaging would to be for any men that is male individuals that are out there, if you have a family history, make sure you're mindful of that and do your exams, and make sure that you are doing the things necessary and sharing and bringing that up to your physician as well. In closing, I just wanted to add again, thank you so much, Nick and Monica, for being transparent. I will share that I've had a patient who was diagnosed with colon cancer about 2 weeks ago. And again, this is Meaty speaking, not on behalf of any agency or where I work. She did not want her husband to know. She literally was diagnosed and said, I'm not saying anything. And I'm thinking, are you seriously? And she didn't. And so everyone goes through this journey in a very unique way. We don't know what those backgrounds are. And I'm just grateful that people like Nick and Monica are able to share their stories of triumph and victory, and even the fortitude that even Nick is sharing as she is still going through. And so I know I can't speak for that because that has not been my story, but even the time of, as I shared with you all, getting my both biopsies, I can only imagine what Nick and Monica have dealt with, because that day or 2 days were some of the most fearful days of my life, waiting to see what the results are. And so I'm sure Keisha will know this. I always are going to have some type of biblical reference just to simply say that 3 John 1 and 2 tells us, dear friend, I pray that you may go with good health, and that all may go well with you, and that you can prosper even as your soul prospers. And so God wants us to be healthy. God wants us to take care of ourselves. He wants us to live good and fruitful lives. And I just ask and implore everyone to do whatever you can. We're all going to die at some point, right? No one's going to live here to be 150, right? But just do your absolute best. So when that time comes, like Nick and Monica, that you are in a situation where you do have the strength and power to fight. So when the time comes to fight, you are able to do so. And so thank you, Keisha, Dr. Mack, for having us. Thank you for moderating. You did a wonderful job. And to my dear friends and sisters, Nick and Monica, prayers, love with you always. And thank you for sharing your story and being so transparent. And hopefully it will help someone through their journey.
Yes. Dr. Mack?
I'm
Catch yourself. Catch yourself.
That's another great tool. Deep breathing, you guys.
Mindfulness.
Absolutely amazing, and just such a wonderful conversation that I knew it would be. I was super excited about this day, and it was, it blessed me, and I'm sure our audience even more than I had anticipated. So I'm so very grateful to you, wonderful, wonderful women, each of you, providing your wisdom, your experience, and sharing your love and opening your hearts and being transparent, because that is what will make the difference. And so I really thank you all. And, for those out there who are watching, if you are in need of support and would like to speak to someone, reach out to, the MECCA Group or whomever else that you might need. We are here. We're doing telehealth, and, it's you can still receive support even during these difficult times.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much, everyone, for everything that you've shared. I hope our audience, learned a great deal, and most of all, that with support, with assistance, we can get through anything. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back in, I think, maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Mhm.
Have a great Friday, everyone, and a great weekend.
Thank
Take care.
you.